Have you been a witness to like in person to something that was racist? Like have you been able to actually identify something that you're like, wow, that is racist right there?
Well, working in the bars and things, yeah, throughout the years, I've seen some of it, yes. But and that's the thing about it is people get to drinking and they say things they shouldn't say, or they do things they shouldn't do, and it works both ways. I've seen black people do things too in bars and things to white women per se. It's that they weren't welcome, or they were being too aggressive. But white men have done that too as well. I mean, it's the bars. It's something that happens in the bars, I guess, which is it's kind of sad to be that to think of anything different, that people could just get along and not be so aggressive toward one another, and be nice. Be nice to be nice to everybody. No matter what color they are. But
what is it Ellen says? Be kind. That's
be
what
kind.
she says all the time. Be kind.
And that's the thing. You should be kind to people. I mean, if you want to be treated kindly, you have to be. You have to treat people kindly. If you want to get treated kindly, it works. And that's a simple thing that we have all been taught as kids, to treat people kindly if you want to be treated kindly.
Yeah.
Because you're going to get what you give.
All right, let's get to our next guest. I'm really excited about this one. She's a friend. Hopefully she'll still be a friend after the show. She is a politician. She's a councilwoman and here in Southern California, and I'm really happy to have her on the show. Stevevonna Evans.
Hey, thank you. How are you?
I'm excited. I'm so happy that the internet's working tonight and like people are actually able to come on. It's exciting.
Yeah, thank you, Spectrum, I guess.
Right. So, racism. It's a thing in this country right now.
Is it?
Yeah. It's appearing, as far as like you see on the media and you see in social, it's appearing to be a very serious issue, and it's the tipping point appears to be what happened to George Floyd last month in May with the police officer that had his leg on him, and then the other two that were on him, as well as the other one that was standing by, which all resulted in his death.
Right.
So yeah. I guess the question, I'm going to start the question with you that we did with our other guests. Okay. Is it police brutality? Is it racism? Is it a mix of both, or is it a little more complex than that? That is the issue in hand right now in this country.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a mix of things. It's definitely this systematic racism that is just, part of our American history. And so it's definitely not as simple as one or the other, or just a combination. It's definitely a complex, very, very complex situation that's going to take a lot of work to work through.
What's the first step? Like, how do we go forward? Because like our last guest said, and I do agree with this, it's not going to be solved overnight. It's not going to actually completely be done away with, Yeah. But continuing the steps forward, now that it's been addressed in this country, what do we do next if it is in fact a major problem?
Well, I don't think that it's been addressed. So I think that you have to look at it kind of like this 12-step program in AA, right? The first step is admitting that we have a problem. And we still have, countless people, I don't know if they're just keyboard warriors or what they are, but that are continuing to say that racism doesn't exist. And if we can't first acknowledge that we have a problem, how are we ever going to work through it and get to anything better than what
so then the question then is, okay, people are in denial and they don't want to acknowledge there's a problem. How do we get them to see that? Like, how do we show it? Like how do we show them how it all works?
I think that people have to be open, because it's been shown, in my opinion. You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like it's very much in your face. You have an officer kneeling on the back of someone's neck. You have a young man running. I don't care if he was in a house or not in a house. I don't care. He's running down the street and he's gunned down. You have, children playing with toy guns in the park getting shot. You have people in a store that sells guns holding a gun that's on sale getting shot. I think that it's very in your face if you choose to see it.
Okay, but let me ask you this question. And hi, I'm Kevin, by the way.
Hi, Kevin. Nice to meet you.
It's nice to meet you, too.
You're so rude.
Oh, no, you're fine. No, it's good. I'll ask you the question that Andrew asked earlier to the other guest. Do you think that, though, this whole thing is more about racism, or is it about police brutality?
What whole thing?
This whole thing with George Floyd, him getting pushed on the neck. If this had happened to a white person, do you think that this would have been such an issue as it would have been since that it happened to George Floyd? Do you think that it would have been more of a racism issue, or do you think that it would have been just police brutality?
If it was a white cop and a white person, I would assume that people would say it was a police brutality situation.
Okay, so you don't think in any way that this was basic police brutality just because of the person was black, and that adds the racism to it? What if it had been a black cop and a white person? Do you think that would have been the same thing?
I think that's tough. I think that if it's a black cop and a white person, and this makes me sound super hypocritical, but I think that it kind of changes the dynamic, because there's not systemic racism towards white people. So, to say that a black cop is racist, and people will have different feelings towards racism, but I don't believe that you can have that there is a reverse racism. I don't think that exists. So in that case, if it was, hypothetically, it was a black cop and a white person, civilian, I would assume that would just be a police brutality issue.
Well, let me ask you this then. Okay, so when it's a white cop and a black guy or girl, is it ever looked at as just police brutality and not racism? How do we determine whether or not, dang, that is police brutality, or dang, that is racism, or dang, that cop's racist and just did police brutality? Like, how do
you don't know. You don't know. And so I think that, one of the major things is, let's stop police brutality. Then that takes out one element, right? Because it's layered. I don't know that cop is a racist in the George Floyd. I don't know him, right? But it's definitely, what it goes back to is what we're conditioned to think. And the fact that the I don't want to call it a race war, but the dynamic between police officers and people of color specifically, and I won't even say specifically, because if we look at the statistics, brown folks have almost as many problems as black people. But it's just, the system has been set up to, in my opinion, the police officers are put on a pedestal and they can do no wrong in some people's eyes. And so I don't know. That's a tough question, Andrew. I think that
Andrew, he asked the tough questions. You have to get with him. But you said a key thing here about, and I'm going to add to what Andrew just said. You said people have been conditioned. Okay, so people have been conditioned to think that every time an officer arrests a black person, that it might be racism. And I don't agree with that, because some people deserve to be arrested and in trouble. I don't think that. Now, I do believe that there's a brutality part of this, because this gentleman, I don't care if he's black, white, Asian, or of any other color, he didn't deserve to die the way that he died. He did not deserve to have a knee in his neck for 8 minutes and 43 seconds. He did not deserve that. If it had been a white person, he would not have deserved that. If it had been a Chinese person, a person of any color, any race, Indian, whatever, with a knee in their neck for 8 minutes and 43 seconds, no one deserves that. So there's a huge amount of police brutality in there that should never have happened.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure, I don't know if the officer was racist or not either. But whether he was or wasn't, I don't believe that's the question. I think the question is did he was brutality. He was brutal to this person. This person should never have had this happened to them, period. And I believe, and I discussed this also, I believe all of America, whites, blacks, Asians, everybody who lives in America, no matter what race, no matter what creed, no matter what color, they all came together for a couple of days when this happened because they saw the brutality that this officer put on George Floyd.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I also want to talk about, like, because I have talked to Stevevonna about this exhaustively. The way other races, mostly white people, treat black people when just having conversations with them. Because again, somebody that is white, that is now starting to see what white privilege really is. I didn't even realize that I was doing things that do come off offensive to certain people. I have a lot of black friends, as I've said, and it's like
Things like that we want to stop saying, but
You
carry
see-
on.
You have a lot of friends, Andrew. He really doesn't have
friends,
he doesn't
okay?
really have a lot of friends after this, but you know.
A good example is I did an interview recently with a black man. He was a pastor. He's a communicator, right? He is a public speaker, because that's what a pastor does. And after I was done doing the interview, as a producer / reporter, I simply said to him, well spoken, because in my head, I got what I needed for the story, for the piece. And apparently that is, as it was told to me later, that is an offensive thing to say to a black person, just because of the fact that they are black. And I don't look at it that way, because I was never raised or taught to judge colors or to treat people of color a different way. I treated everybody the same way. So I didn't understand. And that's the not knowing, that's being blind to the sensitivity of the situation.
Well, I would say give it context so that people don't think the person that told you that was just being anal. What happens is the stereotypical black person is, neck rolling, finger snapping, Shanae from Martin.
Which was a really good show, by the way.
I agree. But that's stereotypically what people think of when they think of black people, right? When you're imitating a black person, that's what you do. That's where you go. And so for us, and I got it all the time, growing up. Oh my gosh, you speak so well for a black girl.
But that's different, because
like a white person.
They added that in there for a black girl. I feel like that's completely different.
It's still the insinuation is the same.
So insinuation, though, you're saying right now, do you think that your education has a lot to do with the way you speak, as opposed to maybe someone like Shanae or whatever the case may be? I feel like education has a lot to do with that.
I don't think so. I mean, it could. I'm sure people that go to, a 4-year amazing college talk better than I do, or have a better vocabulary than I do. But I don't think the problem is, right? Either way, and what it goes back to is you talk like a white person. So now having proper English is equated to being white. So white is proper and black is not, or talking with slang, or the Urban Dictionary, however you want to look at it, is black, and being able to formulate sentences is proper and white. So it's just oh, that went orange.
Yeah, that went
right. It's just I don't know what the right term is, but it's definitely just another way to keep us divided and to say that one race is superior to the other.
Let me ask you this then, Stevevonna. When white people choose to adopt black lifestyles or things that were created within black culture for their own identity, is that looked at as a form of being racism or being racist, or a form of disrespecting blacks?
I don't think it's disrespect unless you're putting on blackface. I think that the problem is, and what one of the issue that people take with that is, you don't respect me as a black person. There's systematic racism. There's all these things, but you're willing to take my culture and call it your own. So, you have a white chick with dreads and it's like, oh, that's cute. Or Kim Kardashian with her cornrows, and she came out with that. And it's like, folks been doing cornrows since the slave days. So no, Kim Kardashian didn't come up with that. So I think that's where it gets a little touchy. I don't think that I don't know why that lighting keeps doing that. It's crazy. I don't think that it's a form of racism to take grades in
or disrespect, I guess is what I'm trying to get at.
I don't think it's disrespectful at all. I think that, but again, and I should have started with this. I am not the national spokesperson for all Black people. You might get another chick on here, and she said, "Yeah, it's definitely disrespectful." I don't think personally that that's disrespectful. The disrespect comes when you claim it as yours, or that you are the creator of this. That's when it's disrespectful.
Kevin?
I'm just like I'm not really sure how to approach anything with I just feel that you know, a lot of it has to do. We were talking about earlier with the riots with Michael Wiley a while ago on the first interview, and you know, I feel like a lot of it has to do with you know, there's good people who protest, and you know, like we've had the protest. I totally believe that you can protest. I don't have anything against that. The problem with it is that we have these fringe cells that are coming into these peaceful protest. I can't even get this out.
Peter Piper picked
these
a pack
peaceful
of
protesters. I can't get all those. Yeah, Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. Okay, so these peaceful protesters were in this whole thing doing a nice thing, but then you have these cells of people who come in, and they're calling them fringe cells, and they're coming in and initiating violence and looting and turning over police cars and catching them on fire and causing fire bombs with firecrackers, and they're stealing TVs and they're stealing shoes. And I don't feel that's an educated thing. I don't think that's not getting something that a person of color is trying to get across about this whole George Floyd thing. You know, a peaceful protest, yes, and I realize Colin Kaepernick, he knelt at the national anthem, and we've had that talk too, and then now the NFL's apologizing and the whole bit, but I don't feel that any kind of violence among these cells of people who are peaceful protesters at these places is making people of color look any better. And it's not just people of color in these cells that are causing problems. It's white people too. I've seen it on the TV. And it's not older people. It's actually younger people, you know, teenagers and people in their 20s that are causing these problems for people of color who I would think the people of color would be mad about this. Wouldn't they be mad? Stevevonna, wouldn't they be mad about this?
So again, I don't speak for all Black people or people of color. But
well, does it make you mad? How about that? Does it make you feel? How does it make you feel when they do that?
So, to be honest with you, I don't agree with rioting and looting. But who am I to say? And I think this is part of the problem that ADOS folks have with.
Wait, sorry. What is that?
American Descendants of Slaves.
Okay, thank you.
Because we do need to also make sure that we're clear in the difference between African Americans, Black people. There's you know, people that are actually African Americans from Africa that have migrated here. So we are, you know, in the process of making sure that we have a distinction because their journey is different than people that are, you know, ADOS. So first, what we need to do is we need to acknowledge the fact that there are three different things going on at one time. You have protesters who are simply trying to peacefully demonstrate. You have rioters who may also be for the cause. They just don't feel like peaceful is working. So they are choosing to go about it in a more
aggressive way.
Aggressive is good. Aggressive way. And then you have looters who typically, in my opinion, don't care about the movement at all, but they see the opportunity of a store that's been broken down, the doors off, so let me go and do what I want to do. Now, those three categories are three different types of people. It's not for me to say, and it's dang sure not for someone outside of the movement to try to tell anyone how they should protest, right? I can't, and me and my sister were having this conversation the other day, we didn't grow up in a racial environment, right? We lived on a street where we were multicultural. All the kids played together. We went inside everybody's houses. Nobody's parents appeared to be racist. So we didn't grow up in that environment. So some things that are hard for us to understand could be hard for us to understand because we didn't grow up in that environment. We didn't grow up in a place where Black people were getting killed every day by police. We didn't grow up in a place where the police were coming to our neighborhood only for bad things all the time. I mean, we knew the officers by name. We had a cop that lived on our street. It was like, hey, Mike, how are you? So we didn't grow up in that. So for me to then sit back and judge someone for choosing to protest in a different manner, I can't do that because I don't know where their mindset is. Maybe they feel like they peacefully protested. Maybe they were out there with Kaepernick kneeling, and they said that's not working. Maybe they watched Martin Luther King, and they said, well, Martin Luther King did it peaceful, and that didn't change anything, and everybody hated him, and they killed him. So that's not the way to go. It's not for me, and it's not for anyone else to, in my opinion, to judge or tell someone how they should and should not protest. Because like you said, Kaepernick tried to do it super peaceful. And a whole lot of people had a whole lot of problems with that. And now, like you said, yeah, the NFL is apologizing. And while I appreciate their apology, are they going to give back the fines that they had players pay for peacefully protesting at their games?
You have a very valid point there with the whole Kaepernick thing, or Kaepernick, however you say his name, that I didn't even think of before. That was peaceful. He was making a point at that time, and it shook a lot of nerves. And I mean, obviously he's on a major, professional team, national television coverage, et cetera, et cetera. So the message was echoed or amplified even more, the power of media. And yeah, people had a huge problem with that and were really pissed off.
I don't.
Wait, I'm not done.
Okay, go ahead.
On the flip side, let's fast forward to 2020, the death of George Floyd, which has sparked a huge outrage, which started as peaceful and then quickly escalated to violent before the looting happened. It started to get violent. And it was all at that time before we realized, oh, there's other people out here that aren't protesting, that are taking advantage of it. It was just all a part of the protest. And that irritated a lot of people. As a matter of fact, if I'm not mistaken, I believe the people that were upset about all these protests happening were the exact same people that were upset about the Kaepernick protesting several years ago in the NFL. Completely different demonstrations, but you get the same response from a certain part of this country. Why?
Because they don't care. So
they don't care about what specifically?
About the situation. They don't care about the reason behind the protest, right? Because it doesn't affect them. They don't see it as a problem. So why are you inconveniencing me and making me have to wait at the stoplight longer, to protest something that doesn't exist? So for those people, there is no right way. We shouldn't be protesting for anything because nothing is wrong. We're just complaining. We're just causing a scene. So the people that, like you said, complain about the silent kneeling, which is what a veteran told him to do, because he started out sitting down on the bench, and he said, "No, you should kneel." Right? Let's call it what it is. A veteran told him to do it that way, so he did.
And people forget those little details, right?
So because they're not important. They don't fit their narrative. What is their narrative? There is no racism. The guy shouldn't have been running down the street. He shouldn't have been in that neighborhood.
Well, I'm not sure.
George shouldn't have had a counterfeit $20 bill.
Oh, I'm not sure of the fact of the Kaepernick thing. That I think the thing was because of the way it was done over the national anthem, which is a very patriotic thing. If he'd have done it in some other kind of situation, maybe it might have gotten a better.
But like how, Kevin? Like how? Like give me an example.
I'm not sure. But I think that he could have come up with a different way other than using it as a national anthem, which it upset all people of all colors, not just the white people, because he was kneeling over the national anthem of our freedom of our country. I do think, however, that if he could have came up with something different, I don't know what that could have been. I'm not in, but surely
it was peaceful though, right?
Yeah, I agree. Yes, it was peaceful, but it was still very. I thought it was disrespectful to the fact that of the United States and the national anthem and all the veterans. Even though a veteran told him, I think that was bad advice to begin with in the first place. The veteran told him to do that, and I'm sure the veteran that told him to do that probably had his best interest at heart and thought maybe that might be a good, peaceful way to do it. But you've got so many really super hardcore American people who believe in the American flag and the national anthem, and when they go to games and baseball and football and basketball, and they stand and they pray, and they, a lot of things are being taken away from the American standard, God and in God we trust, and the way things are written in money, and God in the courthouse, and people are complaining about religion and the whole bit. So there has to be some other solution to this problem that Colin Kaepernick could have done in order to not offend. I get that he wants to make a point, and he should make a point, as he should make a point. But I think he needs to do it without trying to offend more people than actually making a helping hand for people that he cares about that should not be going through this racism issue and the brutality that comes along with it.
So I disagree, only because what I hear when you say that, and you're not the first person to say it, right, is that the flag and the national anthem hold more value than human life. It's the same as the rioters and people being upset about stores being broken into, but they're not talking about why people are breaking into the stores. So,
well, I got to say, human life is what the flag represents. The human flag represents veterans.
I agree. And so if not all of us are being created equal, and not all of us are free, and not all of us are, have the equal rights, then is that not the perfect time to do that?
I just feel like that is not the perfect time to do that. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't do something like that to get people to recognize equal rights, but I don't believe that that would be the right time to do it. Because this is about veterans and people who have died for this country in order for Kaepernick to kneel, in order for people to get these rights. But it's more, to me, the flag and the national anthem is more about fighting for. We all should have freedom in our country to do is what we're doing, and people are doing that now.
But I think to Stevevonna's explanation, the reason why black people are protesting is for the same equal rights that white people have in this country, and it seems like it's imbalanced.
Well, there's an imbalance. I think there's an imbalance because of a couple of things. She mentioned the Urban Dictionary earlier. Okay, why do we have to have an Urban Dictionary? Why don't we have a dictionary that covers everybody? Like we had. There's certain slang that people of color use. There's also black entertainment television. There has to be a black entertainment television. Why does there have to be one? Isn't that kind of a small part of racism that makes people think that that's not, you want to be included in everything and everybody to be equal, but that's basically cornering a certain market for people of color and not everybody. Am I not right?
No. How many movies and or sitcoms or anything else can you name where there are black actors and actresses as lead characters?
Oh, tons now. Tons. Blackish is the first one that comes to my mind right now.
What? Blackish?
Yeah, that comes to my mind right away. Of course, Cosby's had all the Cosby characters, for years and years in the 80s. He had a spin-off of The Different World, and In Living Color was also a very good show. That these are earlier shows. I don't know about a lot of the new. There's a lot of newer shows that do include black actors, and some are lead characters. So Denzel Washington been in tons of movies. He's a lead character. Same thing with Cuba Gooding Jr. Many of these characters are leading characters in different situations. So I don't see. I get it. I mean, I was a huge fan of Soul Train. I still, to this day, love that television show. It's great. It's funny because I'm a, obviously a disc jockey and work with music and things like that. So to me, that was so cool to watch that television show, and it was ahead of its time. I mean, Don Cornelius, he was a pioneer in making a movement for black people to have a television show like Dick Clark had, or like Casey Kasem had a radio. Radio. It was a show, but it was geared toward just black people. You didn't see white people coming on there and dancing, but you see black people coming on to Dick Clark.
I do have the statistics according to Statista.com, which is fairly reputable. Black people are still the minority, though, in show business. About 28% lead actors in movies when you from year to year when you sum it all up. Television from the 2016 to 2017 season, it's about 16%, and I'm pretty sure it hasn't risen that much since. I'm curious to know how much of those percentages actually are contributed from things like BET, or other. There's another one I believe called Essence, which is women's television, but for just black women. I'm curious to know, because those are networks, right? Those aren't the ABCs and NBCs. Those are networks, so it's more black content. I'm curious how much those are bigger chunks of those small percentages to begin with.
I would argue a huge chunk, and even if people are getting their start on those channels, right? Because they have the outlet. People are looking for black actresses and actors on those networks. But it just comes down to, like, why does that matter? Why does one or two channels in the hundreds of channels bother you?
Well,
why does it matter?
I think what it is it's like black people were, just to put it like in layman's terms, like, okay, I'm black and it's harder for us to break into show business. So let's start a network where we have those opportunities so we can try to get something going here. That's how I look at it.
Well, you can look at it that way. I mean, that's a good way to look at it. I see your point. But the thing is that, everybody's wanting to be equal. Everybody's wanting to be equal, but you're putting yourself in a corner that is not making you equal, because it's basically secluding you. It's
creating opportunity, though, when you don't have as much opportunity with what's currently there.
Okay, I can get with that. It's creating opportunity.
And I'm sure some of those actors that are on those shows, it's acting. Actors are a dime a dozen. I'm sure, like, they're on some black soap opera on BET. I don't know if BET does soap operas, but if they do, just as an example, and their agent is still sending them out on the NBC and the ABC and the CBS auditions also. But in the meantime, they got this steady gig over here on Black Entertainment Television.
Right. So it just goes back to what Michael Wiley was saying earlier. That's the, you can have an educational application, put one down, and they're going to look at the name LaQuisha, or look at, Tyrone. Tyrone, and they're going to say, and they throw the application out and go on to someone else who's white. That's what they're doing. That needs to stop. I mean, everybody needs to be on board with how educated or how responsible or how qualified someone is from whether it be from an acting job to a desk job to a police officer's job to, the qualifications should be there no matter what color. But it has to do with the education. Education is the main thing that is going to get anybody any work, period. And education is what's going to stop a lot of this racism too. We have to be. Everybody has to be educated about it in all colors and all aspects of it, no matter what. And that's the only way this thing is ever going to stop.
So, I mean, we can go down the education disparity rabbit hole if you'd like.
Well, I was talking with Michael Wiley earlier. There's people that represent, like you were saying earlier, on Martin. There's a stereotype. I think that's, to me, that's stereotypical. And I don't think, there's a lot of people of color who have great education out there, but yet they're treated stereotypically because people on the streets don't represent them well. These people who are mostly educational, are smart people with a good education and they're of color, don't get out on the street and do the things they're at home with their families. They're at home with their children. They're raising families. They're raising kids. They're doing the things that a respectable person would do. And the people that are representing a lot of the people of color on the streets, with their slang and their language and the way they wear clothes or the way they act or they're looting or whatever the case may be, is not representative of what good, educated people are of any color.
Before you respond, Stevevonna, we have that in the white world too. Also,
obviously, yeah, absolutely.
There's a couple places I could recommend you to drive to if you'd like to see them.
There's bad.
We have that also in the white world as well.
There's bad representations of all races in this world period, no matter white, whatever. There is bad reputations of white people too. You see it. A lot of people call it trailer trash. I don't mind telling it because I'm a redneck. I come from New Mexico and Texas, and that's what they call it down there. Some of it's white trash.
I wasn't going to say it, but he said
I don't mind saying it.
That is the term
I don't mind saying it because it works both ways. It doesn't work just one way, and that's my whole thing about this whole deal. It works in all aspects. It's all about the education and it's about what's inside you and how you represent yourself and how you represent your people. And if you don't do that well, people are going to notice that, and you're going to get what you give, I feel.
Okay. 2 things. 1, do you think that Black people have the same access to education as white people?
They should. I don't
But
believe.
do you think they do right now, currently?
It depends on how hard they want to work. Black people need to work just as hard as white people do. White people work hard to get where they're going. Don't you think Black people should too as well? I mean, a lot of white people are handed a lot of stuff. I admit that. Andrew's a perfect example. I'm just kidding.
Oh, yeah. Why do you say? See, again, something I'm trying to learn here. Why do you say that Black people don't have the same access to the education?
Because they don't.
No, I'm asking Stevevonna.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Right, because he didn't say that. He said that we don't work hard enough for it.
There are some that do not.
If we start talking, it just goes back to, what was it called? Redlining, when they wouldn't let Black people live in certain areas.
But that's been gone for a long time
correct.
now.
But correct, right? So we think. But if you're looking at the poor neighborhoods, right, which is where we typically find your Black and brown people, how are schools funded? Based off property tax. If the houses are cheaper, the schools aren't getting the same amount of funding, and so then the kids aren't getting the equal education. So we're not even talking about college level and that. Let's talk K through 12, right? Let's talk about a school in Compton. I don't know. I've never lived in Compton, so I'm assuming, please, Compton people, don't get upset with me. But let's talk about a school in the hood, whatever it may be, and a school in Beverly Hills. One school is getting X amount of dollars, and one school is getting X amount of dollars. It's not the same. So is that the kids' fault that they're only getting access to this education? They're not working hard enough because they're only getting this education at their elementary school?
So you think that, like, Beverly Hills, for instance, has more property tax than Compton would?
I do.
So therefore, the education in those areas is not likely as it would be for someone coming from Beverly Hills.
Correct.
Okay.
Compton would have less standard. Their standards would be lower in Compton than they would in Beverly Hills.
I see. So that does make some sense. But the problem is that would people of Compton or any the hood, as you say, would be more susceptible to actually working hard to get where they want to go, as opposed to people. I mean, I've known people in Beverly Hills who just get things handed to them. I mean, we're going through a thing with Lori Loughlin right now, and Felicity Huffman paying to get their college, their high school graduates into college, which is totally wrong. You don't pay $500,000. That's not right for anybody. So right. Why would a lot of these kids are raised to where they want to party all the time. They want to drink and smoke, and they're not about getting an education. They'd rather.
What kids are like that?
A lot of kids.
Are you referring to
Kids in lower income communities? Is that what we're talking about here?
Yes, kids in lower income communities. Kids in higher income communities do the same thing, but they get advantage of things. Some don't though. Some all stay. Some kids really do work hard for what they want to get. It depends on your motivation of how you want to do it. I've seen kids today are lazy in all aspects, I believe. They don't really want to work to get, it's too much about going out and having fun with friends and partying and doing things instead of staying home and working. There are kids who want to stay home and get educations, but most don't nowadays. They want to get everything handed to them. And with lower property taxes in lower income areas, maybe kids like that need to figure out a way to get some of that money distributed to those schools, maybe, or something, to make a better education for them if they really want to work for it. There's got to be a solution for that as well, right?
Yeah, legislature needs to change the way they distribute money.
So does that fall on the politicians then in those jurisdictions?
I'm gonna try to fix my light.
Okay. So I would assume that would fall on the politicians or the elected officials in those particular municipalities, right?
It would be a state thing because schools are funded through state funding.
Oh, so then the local representatives and the senators for different districts then.
Yeah, but I mean, this is going back to the way it's always been. It's always been schools are funded based off the property tax. So, even our schools here in Adelanto where we have lower property taxes, they're they're making the best of it. They're doing a lot better now, but it's one of those things. But I think that what I'm hearing is a lot of stereotypical stuff, and it's sad, but I'm happy that we're having the dialogue so that hopefully I can help change some mindset. I don't think a lot of kids want to just sit around and smoke and do whatever. I think that people are a product of their environment.
They don't know any better is what you're saying.
Huh?
They don't know any better is
Correct.
What you're saying. Okay.
Yeah. And there are a few that get out, right? But we're talking masses. There are a few that say, I don't want this anymore. I want to be something different.
But why do they not know any better? I mean, that's the whole thing. Why do they not know any better already? Have they been educated to do so? Why are they not being educated to do so? And also, you're talking about the property taxes. Got elected officials who always promise the black communities, we're going to do this for the black community. We're going to give you money and we're going to help you and do this. And that never comes across. And you know it, and I know it. That never comes across. Things that are promised, they do it to get the votes, and you know that. And that's exactly what's wrong with a lot of places, and this is why it's sad. I totally agree with you on that. I'm 100% with you on that whole deal. But to say, gosh, I've lost my train of thought now for a second because
it's deep.
It is very deep. I mean, I want to see. The education is the thing. You say people don't know any better, Andrew. Well, why do they not know any better? Why are they not being taught in their homes?
I don't have those answers because I just recently have been revealed to me that I have white privilege, and I'm starting to understand and rethink the way that I do things in association with my thought process and even my interactions and my outlooks on the black community, because I've been doing it wrong, not on purpose, unknowingly.
Mm-hmm. That's same here.
So I don't have the answers. In my world, which is a great world, I would like black people to be treated the same way that I view them and I outlook black people. I mean, to me, it just makes sense. But I'm not a politician, nor do I even know how to go about on being successful to do something like that. So I'm not the right person for that. All I can be is an ally and be someone who can try to understand the struggle of what's going on and hope that other people that have light skin as myself can start to reflect on themselves and try to understand whether or not they really do understand or they're just going through the motion of understanding. There's a difference. And people that are not black don't understand that because, I treat black people fine, so, I'm not racist. Well, no, you may not be racist, but you may also just not understand the struggle. And that's why people that are white and people that are light skinned need to stop and check themselves to see if they really are getting the message that's coming off here in this country in this day and age. And I think what happened to George Floyd, as I keep going back to, was just the tipping point of that. I mean, we've had a couple different black people that have died this year. There was the lady who was a paramedic in Kentucky who was shot in her sleep. The man from Georgia. Yeah, people are upset, but there was no protest. It was this moment that was caught on camera with a white police officer, which was like, and there it is, another slap in the face. And it was enough to spark mass outrage, which makes you wonder what's going to happen next. We're only halfway through this year. What's going to be the next moment that's caught on camera that's going to spark some other outrage that has to do with different races? That's the next question, if you ask me.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that I agree that it was the tipping point, and I saw a woman whose name I dare not mention speak on the fact that, we're idolizing criminals. When we start speaking up for George Floyd, well, he was a criminal. He had counterfeit money, which he allegedly, right? Because did we have a trial to prove that he actually had a counterfeit 20? And I don't know in what state, country, in what world a counterfeit 20 sentenced you to death, but that's neither here nor there. This is definitely, like you said, the tipping point. We can go down the list. You named the 3 that happened in the last 2 or 3 months. It goes back, Philando Castile's the officer that shot him was just acquitted. The officer that shot the guy in the Walmart was just acquitted. So it's not, oh, they killed him. Just this guy set everybody off. No, people are tired. And we're also in a place where everybody's at home, right? So you kind of have a perfect storm. You've got everyone at home. You've got, we're flipping out for COVID. You've got all the everything, right? All the systematic racism that you're dealing with. You've got, more unemployed Black people than anyone else. You've got all the things. And then on top of all of that, here's another incident. Here we go again.
And you said people. This is what I want. This is what I want people that are listening to this show that are not Black to listen to. The reason why this was a tipping point and this is different and this is why I woke up. There are not just Black people, and it's very obvious. It's very, very obvious that there is a plethora of skin colors in these protests. Mm-hmm. I noticed that right off the bat because it was a Black issue, and I'm going to put quotes around that. It was a Black issue. So I'm expecting to see more Black people on TV at these protests, but that's not what I'm seeing. That is definitely not what I'm seeing. I just covered an event locally in the desert this past week, a protest on George Floyd. And I think the best way to describe it is that if I separated the Black people in that group, which there was like hundreds, I want to say at least 600 or 700 people were there. If I took all the Black people out, there was a small crowd. It's a smaller crowd of Black people than you would think. And then you look at everyone else is there. It's every other race under the sun. Mm-hmm. And to me, that says, yeah, people are tired. There's a reason why it's not just Black people that are at these protests. It's not that all the Black people got together and are finally convincing or brainwashing rather other races that there's a fake issue. No, that's not it. Other people are starting to understand, and other people meaning other races are starting to understand there's some bad things here with race in this country, and we need to rally around that and get it figured out and solved. And when I say that as I'm referring to the younger generation because it is a bunch of young kids, probably mostly from Generation Z, that are out there throwing this message forward. In that generation, racism is not a majority issue amongst them, and it shouldn't be as they become adults into the real world. And they're showing that with these protests, and that's why I go back to all of the people that are not Black that need to sit and maybe reflect on the way that they're viewing everything. Be open, as I think Stevevonna said earlier, to get that there is something bigger here that's not like the 90s or the 60s when Martin Luther King, who we all like to quote on Facebook, was doing these protests. There's something different here. Because in my history books, I remember seeing those civil rights movements with the majority of black people in those pictures.
See, the problem with Martin Luther King is that these people are quoting the wrong things, and they're doing the wrong things, which is Mr. King would never have wanted in the first place, I don't believe. That's my issue with the whole thing. They're saying things about Martin Luther King that he was a peaceful pastor. He was a peaceful, he was about God and peace, and he didn't want to have violence in these the looting and the things going on are just terrible for this whole deal. Peaceful protests are the thing. Of course, as Stevevonna said earlier, he's no longer with us because someone hated what he was doing and what he said, and he was killed for that. And and same with Rodney King is gone now, of course, too. But that was a violent protest. There was many things happened. It's the same.
When you look back to that stuff, though, Kevin, even the helicopter footage or the on the ground footage of the Rodney King incident in the riots, you saw mostly black people in those situations. I mean, the 90s wasn't that long ago. I'd like to think it wasn't that long ago. But, I mean, that's what you saw on TV, mostly black people. In our history books, Martin Luther King, what did you see? Mostly black people. That's not what you're seeing anymore. You're seeing all these different colors, all these different types of people. Maybe there's more to this than meets the eye. And I think it's important for us to really stop and check how we view these issues, because aside from them being civil rights issues, they're human issues. And it's an issue. Obviously, it's an issue. So let's sit there and look at ourselves and look how we're approaching it to see if we can try to understand what it is, what our part is in all of this. Are we adding? Go ahead.
It's being empathetic, because you'll never understand. Neither one of you and a whole lot of other folks, right, will never understand the fear that I get, law-abiding citizen, politician, when a cop pulls up behind me. Not flashing his lights or anything. I'm just driving down Mojave, and a sheriff, gets behind me, and it's like, oh, shit. Don't edit that out, Andrew. All snap, put my hands up, don't move, all the things, or having to explain to your son why he can't wear a hoodie to walk to the store, or, having to, there's just, you'll never understand those feelings. And there's nothing I can say to help you understand.
And you're right. I will never understand, because I'm not black, and I was never raised to understand those issues, because I view black people like everybody else. So I get it. I get it on that sense that I'm never going to understand, because I was never raised that way.
Okay, but black people don't think you view black people like everybody else. That's exactly what she just said. She says, you and I will never understand what she's having to go through. But
being empathetic to that is, I think, the point that she's trying to make.
And also, Stevevonna, do you think that based on what Andrew just said, there's a diversity of people in these protests now? Do you think that you might be making progress? Because he said, in the 60s and the 90s, it was more black people in the protest. Now it's not so much. You take a lot of other diversities in the protests. Do you think maybe that's because the blacks are making some progress into what's happening with this, and maybe people are starting to be more empathetic, maybe to understand more about what's going on?
I do. I think that Andrew hit the nail on the head. As the generations change, right? I always thought that with my generation, racism would be gone. But it wasn't. I've had a few encounters with people my age, but with my kids, my 16-year-old and his friends, and to see, I like Andrew, I had a diverse group of friends. It wasn't like all the black kids hung out and all the white kids we all just hung out. Senior lawn, everybody's chilling. But the kids nowadays, and I'm going to use some Urban Dictionary for you, Kevin, are woke.
I like Urban Dictionary, just for the record.
I'm saying if y'all put our words into the Webster Dictionary, we wouldn't have to have our own dictionary. So I'm going to need you to update that yearly with new words.
Bootylicious.
Exactly. I think that I agree with you on this. I think that, if we're going to be more as one, Your word should be in the Webster dictionary. We should.
They just change so frequently, Kevin. We use them this week and we don't use them anymore next week.
So
it would be too much to
so you guys are just wishy-washy.
When it comes to our vocabulary, we kind of like to change it up. But, the kids are woke, and no matter where you stand with, politicians. I was at a rally for a politician in 2016, and we're waiting in line to get into the building. And there were these two young, like, I don't even know if they could vote, girls, and they were just having conversation deeper than I could even comprehend. And I'm like, dang, at this age, 18, because they were talking about they were in high school. So I knew they were high schoolers. So 18 or younger, they're turned up. They're just like, let's go. They're ready to vote, and they're ready to fight, and they're ready. So we're definitely working with a different generation of kids. And I think that it's going to take them, right? Because we have the generations that are still around that were here for the Martin Luther King era, right? And the peaceful, and let's be real, Malcolm X was there too. So not everybody was peaceful. So we have that era. Then you've got my era where we're kind of just like, whatever, we just gonna do us, right? And then you have these kids that are a melting pot, and they're like, you're not gonna treat my friend, and they're speaking out. They're not just quiet, because I think our problem, Andrew, is that people our age, like, you might have saw it, but you were like, dang. But these kids are like I saw a video today where a young girl was telling her parents, like, you're racist and you're wrong, and I don't want nothing to do with you.
Right.
And that's this new era of kids.
They're more outspoken.
Outspoken, because I think that our generation are giving our kid, like, when I grew up, it was like, children should be seen and not heard, right? Sit down, shut up. We're not talking. Are you in grown folks' business? That's the kind of stuff I got as a kid. Our kids now they're just so much more advanced, and they're having conversations, and they're allowed. Sometimes I tell my kid, like, you got to remember, I am your mom. You can't be saying all this stuff. But they're outspoken, and they say what they think. And I think that that's an avenue that's opening up the movement, because you have black kids, white friends with black friends, right? White kids with black friends, and their parents are talking crazy, and the kids are calling them out. And I think that it's don't be disrespectful to your parents' children, but I think that it's a great thing that the movement does seem to be moving. I definitely feel like this time around, it's something is different. I don't know what it is, but I feel like we are actually making progress. And again, it's just going to take everybody being empathetic and willing to listen. I White Fragility, I suggest everybody read it. Listen to it if you're an Audible listener like me, because it definitely opens your eyes to, like Andrew said, things that you didn't realize you were doing or saying, or things that we have to think about that you don't. When I, going back to the resume thing that you talked about, Kevin, when I named my kids, I can't name them any of my, anybody from my heritage, because heaven forbid I put something from the slave days down on their birth certificate. They'll never get a job, right? And now that everything's digital, we're really gonna be messed up if they gotta try to apply for a job through the internet. So, those are just privileges that we don't think about, because I think when people hear white privilege, they think of like materialistic things. And then you have the argument, well, I grew up in a trailer park. Well, that's not what we're saying. For me, it's not a materialistic thing. It's basic things. It's like I said, getting a police behind me, or walking into a store,
right. I like to call it rite of passage in society.
Yeah.
You got some feedback there, Andrew. I couldn't understand what you're saying.
Rite of passage in society.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right. Well, we have got to wrap up this podcast. This was amazing. I do appreciate you, Stevevonna, for coming on. Real quick, is there anything that you want to put out there? Anything on an agenda of any kind that's important to you or close to your heart that you'd like to get out? And if so, any contact information for people to find out more info?
Yeah. Well, protests are going on everywhere. In the high desert, we'll be protesting on Sunday from 10 a.m. until 2 p.m.
Well, no, this is a national show. No one
cares about the high desert. Okay.
So just anything overall, that people can check out more information on.
Definitely. I would just say contact your local elected officials. Find out what they're doing to change the narrative. Find out how they're what legislation they're putting up to change the situation. We got different sheriff stations around the country changing their rules and, taking out chokeholds and knee holds or whatever those are called. And, And so find out what your local legislation is doing. And that's everywhere from, your mayors, if you have strong mayor cities, to your assemblymen, your county supervisors, your Senate people. Definitely reach out to them. They should be accessible to you. So yeah, I would definitely say do that. I would say for my white brothers and sisters, definitely read White Fragility.
Who's that by?
Oh, I don't know. Just look up White Fragility. It's the only book that says that.
Okay, I'll Amazon it.
just look it up, Andrew.
Look it up, Andrew. Dang, don't ask questions.
Is there an audio version?
There is. Yeah, I only do audiobooks, guys.
Nice.
I think I have like 4 real books.
Now we're talking.
It is by Michael Eric Dyson.
Okay.
Read that. Find out how you can help the movement. If you want to be an ally, I said it on a live I did the other day. You don't get to just call yourself an ally. That's kind of like a black card. We have to issue that to you. So, talk to your black friends and find out how, what can I do to help you? I have a list of 75 things. If you want me, I can get you that link. But, if you truly want change, first admit that there's a problem, and second, help figure out solutions to move it forward.
Actually, yeah, send me that link in a DM. I'll put it on the description for this podcast.
And actually, I just want to say something here. I want you to know that I'm glad that I hope that we are actually kind of helping you too. We hope that this podcast is helping you to get people who are empathetic to your issues that you want resolved. I think that's the whole idea we're having you on here, by the way. Just want you to know that.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, like I said, I'm not the spokesperson for all black people, and some black people may not agree with what I'm saying.
Right, but to get a black perspective is a lot more important than a bunch of white guys trying to figure it out on their own. You know what I mean?
Probably a little bit. Might want to have at least one token in the room.
You are not a token. Stop it. All right, Stevevonna, I'm going to let you go. We love you. Thank you so much,
awesome.
And I'll talk to you soon.
Appreciate you being here.
Thank you guys so much. Nice to meet you, Kevin.
Nice to meet you too, sweetheart.
All right, so that was Stevevonna.
There you go. What a sweet lady. I liked her. She's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll get to meet her
great.
sometime in person somewhere. That'll be awesome.
Yeah, no, she's a good talk. She's a really good talk. So yeah, I know we went way over on time for this show, but I feel
it's
like
it
was validated because it was important to talk about racism in this country. I feel like it's a taboo thing, and people will dismiss it and not want to look at themselves and what their part is in the bigger picture. And I think it's important to just check ourselves from time to time to see if we are contributing to the bad stuff in this country, or if we're actually keeping our side of the street clean, if you will, to make sure that we're doing everything we can to be, standout citizens that support the black community.
Well, she made a valid point earlier too. We don't know. We do not know what they go through. We don't know. We hear stories and
right, but that's not the same.
Right. We don't really know what she. I mean, she's obviously a very well-educated person. She's a politician, and she still worries about getting pulled over by a police officer in her car. Yeah. You shouldn't. I mean, you shouldn't have to worry about that. I mean, you should feel when an officer pulls you over, you probably know you did something wrong, but you should feel safe about it. You shouldn't have to worry about,
how it's going to go down,
or am I the next George Floyd per se?
Yeah.
You don't want to have to worry about that. None of us do, of anybody. I mean, I certainly don't. I mean, I think about that all the time. Officers, she does have a point. Some police officers do have, or Michael did rather earlier, that, they think that they are, above the law. But most do not. I think that's not true for most police officers, though. I think most want to carry out the law and they want to do the job that they were hired to do.
But just like the old cliche, it just takes a couple bad apples to ruin a bunch.
That's right. And there's a few bad apples out there that do ruin it. And this one that did what he did to George Floyd is definitely a bad apple. As a matter of fact, and I know these other officers are training under him, but any common sense would know that this was wrong and you shouldn't be doing this. To stop it, call in backup, have something happen, do something different, but get the man in, if he's accused of something or doing something, get him incarcerated in jail alive, unless he pulls a gun and of course threatens you with your life or something like that. Then of course it was a different circumstance, but this guy was unarmed and he shouldn't have the things that happened to him should not have ever happened to him, no matter what color he was.
Right.
Unfortunately, he was a black person, and that involved adding racism to the brutality card.
All right. Well, aside from all of that, thank you for joining us on this episode of Kevin and Andrew Have a Podcast. Really do, though, please look at your guys' selves and decide whether or not you are being a positive or a negative in this thing called racism in this country. Comments, questions, concerns, you can find us at koacpodcasts@gmail.com. You can also send us a message on Facebook.
Very best podcast.
The best podcast ever.
Podcast ever. I'll never
Kevin
get
and
that
Andrew
right.
Have a podcast. Facebook, YouTube. Hit us up. Watch the show. Subscribe. We're on Spotify. We're on iHeart Radio, Google Podcasts, as well as Apple Podcasts too. So
nationwide and worldwide, across the Americas and across the world, we're here for you. We're Kevin and Andrew Have a Podcast, and this is week number 6.
Yep. You really want to go to 7 there.
I do. My fingers just want to go to 7.
That's next week.
I'm ready for 7. I'll probably do 8 next week or something like that.
So take care of your guys' selves. Call a friend. See how they're doing.
All right.
That's what I got to say. I'm Andrew Caravella. See you guys next time.
And I'm
Later.
Kevin O'Neill. Have a great time. Have a great week. And God bless all of you. And we'll talk to you next week from Kevin and Andrew Have a Podcast.